let's talk a little bit about international and your background. So you spent 3 decades, over 30 years almost, nearly 3 decades being a diplomat, career diplomat. Why did you resign? I think people need to hear your reason for resigning, when you did, and where you were when you did it.
Well, maybe I'll just take a step back to talk just a second about how I got to where I was. So
yes,
when I was a young person in my 20s, I knew I wanted to do something in service because my family really values service. And so I decided to join the U.S. Foreign Service, which is our diplomatic corps. I joined it when I was 27 and served for 28 years. I served in the Balkans in the 1990s when we had the wars happening there. I served on President Obama's National Security Council. And I became ambassador twice. I was a career diplomat. And so I was ambassador to Slovakia. And then ultimately I was ambassador to Ukraine. And my whole career, or most of my career, was one that was in support of freedom. Because I joined when I was a young person, and in college, I went abroad to study. And it was 1989, and I was in London, and I saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. And the start of freedom in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, in those parts of Europe. And it inspired me very much. And I ended up spending my career in those countries of people who were just yearning to be free. And we had a long time bipartisan effort of creating and supporting a Europe whole, free, and at peace. And I spent most of my career in support of this strategic goal for the United States. A strong Europe is also helpful to the United States. It's our biggest trading partner, and it's our most important security partner. So when I was asked to be our ambassador to Ukraine by President Biden, it was a huge honor for me because it was the culmination of all those decades of work in the most important diplomatic post, certainly on the continent, but maybe arguably in the world at the time, to try to repel Russia's full-scale invasion. Russia had come in February of 2022 and tried to take over a country of 40 million people in the middle of Europe. The last time we had that happen in Europe, a world war broke out and millions of people died. What were we asked to do? And I was asked to do, which was a great honor, is to lead a civilian team on the ground to stop Russia and to work with the Ukrainians to help them survive. And for 3 years, I did that. We faced thousands of missiles and drones. I grew our embassy to 1,000 people, and we helped Ukraine stay free. They took back territory, kept the energy grid alive, kept the economy alive. When President Trump was elected to office, my first thought was to try to help shape the policy. And I asked my family, my son, I said, Jack, what should I do? I can quit or I can stay and try to shape the policy. I had worked for 5 presidents, so it would be normal for a career officer to do that. And my son said, Mom, you have to stay. And you have to, if not you, who? So I stayed. But it was very clear from the beginning that all Donald Trump wanted to do was make a deal with Putin. And that became very publicly clear when the White House Oval Office meeting happened, and we all saw it on TV. I saw it on TV too. At that same time, my son texted me and he said, Mom, have you reconsidered your decision? And I said, yes, I have reconsidered it. And so within a few weeks, I actually resigned my position and decided I was going to speak out and come home and ultimately run for office. I could not in good conscience carry out a policy which I felt was a mistake of history, which is what I believe abandoning Ukraine was. It's not just about Ukraine. It's about peace and security in Europe. And it's also about stabilizing and supporting our biggest trading partner and most important security partner, and stopping US troops from getting killed in conflicts like that and having to go and fight because Putin has overtaken Ukraine and then is going to go fight a NATO ally like Poland or one of the Baltic states. So that's the reason.
I am blown away by that big I word, integrity, that you're showing, that you showed by doing this. And I know you're going to gloss over this, but I'm not. I'm pretty sure you're the first female ambassador to be an ambassador in an active war. Like, you were there when ordnance was flying, etc. Pretty sure no one in American history has done that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So
in a war zone.
So underrated badass, but we're not. I want to highlight that. No, I want to highlight that because we have certain people in the administration, Hegseth, who believe someone like you doesn't have the goods to be there, but you stood your ground. And I need to highlight that because it pisses me off to no end that this man keeps doing this. All that being said, what is your take on how the administration is handling this conflict? I mean, they talked a big game. Trump said day one he was going to have this thing solved. Now we had Zelensky here today. We had Netanyahu here today. This has become a cluster across the board. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think the conflict has escalated because of our withdrawal of support and our withdrawal of, being an advisor and also an entity that can help Ukraine manage and win. So essentially, the conflict is escalated in the fact of there's more conflict happening in Russian territory. The Ukrainians have actually been very successful in their long-range strikes, but also there have been a number of drone incidents that have happened in NATO countries like Romania recently, because as the conflict has gotten worse, has escalated, we've seen it expand. This is exactly what we were trying to prevent from happening. And why is that happening? It's happening because what Trump has done is withdrawn US support, and that means our influence is less, and we're leaving it to the countries on the ground to fight it out. I think it's a huge mistake. When we went in to help Ukraine survive, we were very successful. And what I had advised at that time is that we maintain the course. In fact, that we increase our support, in that we increase the pressure on Russia, not just the military pressure. Of course, I believe that is important, but also the economic pressure. And since the Iran war in particular, we have eased the economic pressure. So I hope that this sanctions bill goes through Congress. It's one that was championed by a bipartisan group, and now I think it carries Lindsey Graham's name as one of the people who was behind it, but it was bipartisan. And it's a really positive step forward to hold people accountable who are helping to fund the war machine, because they're buying Russian oil. But also, there's hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian sovereign assets in Europe. So we could also work with the Europeans and get that money so that we can have the Ukrainians use that money to buy US weapons to defend themselves. And this is another important step in having them have long-term security. And then finally, we need to reinvigorate the peace process. I see after today's meeting, there's discussion of that. I mean, frankly, this should have been going on the whole time. We need to be able to deal with multiple security issues around the world at once. And basically, this whole peace process has stalled while the Iran war has been going on. And in fact, the situation has gotten worse.